part of the reason for this event is because the way we do relationships has changed. Nobody wants to go back to the style of relationship where the woman stays at home like the 1950s housewife and the man goes out and is provider and protector. Like, nobody here wants that, right? Oh, you'd like it. Okay, beautiful. Actually, there's another one. Men, if you're looking for a 1950s housewife, there's a few in the front. And then we moved into a style of relationships where two independent people live side by side, coexisting, cohabiting, making some shared choices, but very much living individual lives. And what happens in this particular dynamic is that there's not a lot of juice and spark for life. There's not a lot of polarity or sexiness or desire for intimacy, because when a woman moves out into the world like, okay, I'm going off to do my own thing, I'll protect myself, I'll provide for myself, I'll take care of myself, and I'll do all my own things. Does that feel very sexy and alive? No. Whereas when a woman's like soft and open and she allows energy and feeling to run through her body, does that feel sexy and alive? Yeah. And it's not about just having one or the other. We can have both. But when we interact in our partnerships from this perspective, like if I walk up to Rod and I'm like, hey, baby, what are we going to do tonight? So he's laughing at me because it's not real. But if I brought that to our relationship, there's no inspiration for him. Whereas if I'm in our relationship like, hey, baby.
Yeah.
See, no further words required. And this is actually, that's how I first let him know that I was interested in him, was just like, looking at him, just like this.
There was a little bit more than that.
I'm nervous. But the way we hold our body, the way we move through our lives as women, it actually has a major effect on the way men show up for us. So if I have on my masculine front, protecting, I'm my own provider, I'm taking care of shit and getting stuff done, sure, there's a place for that. But if I bring that to my relationship, then we're not fully connecting. There isn't that spark, that vitality, that sense of like, oh, I want to be close to you tonight. I shut that down if I'm in this mode. And when Rod and I were first getting together, there was this stage where I remember saying to him, if we're going to be in a relationship, I don't want us to just be two people who catch up for dinner or catch up for sex. I actually want us to co-create and weave together. At the time when I said that, I thought I was ready for it. I still had a few things to learn. There were still some things in myself that needed to be adjusted and tweaked, and patterns that are still now revealing to me. But the underlying intention that I wanted a relationship of co-creating, I wanted a relationship of weaving together with somebody, it meant that I needed to show up in my relationship as a woman with vulnerability, with openness, letting my feminine body communicate to him. And so it's from that place that we're sharing with you today. And so we'll talk a little today about sexual shame, because sexual shame is part of what gets in the way, as Rod's already mentioned, his journey with sexual shame. It gets in the way of women truly seeing and feeling men. It also gets in our way as women of showing up fully. We'll also speak a little around how men give and receive love and the differences between men and women. And then we'll speak later on in the day about how to inspire a man's love, how to cultivate a relationship where you experience deep commitment, honoring the feeling of being cherished. For me, this experience of feeling cherished in relationship is so beautiful and so valuable. And I know that it wouldn't be possible if I hadn't actually been willing to go inside and do my own inner work along the way. Because if I'm unwilling to do my inner work, then I'm just offering him an empty shell. And really, who wants to love and be devoted to an empty shell? How many of the women here today would like to feel cherished in your relationships? Beautiful. And how many of the men here today would love to cherish a woman? Beautiful, beautiful, yeah. So that's everybody. Everybody wants to feel cherished. Everybody wants to be cherished. And it is possible. So let's start with the sexual shame conversation. And actually, I'll take one step back from sexual shame, and that's the journey of power plays. Power plays are quite common in relationships. And I want to really bring that up front because I think a lot of power plays happen around sex that stay unnoticed, that stay unconscious. But we need to be aware of those power plays in order to change things. So let's have you close your eyes for a second because you might not want to answer this one honestly, but raise your hand if you feel like you've done power plays around sex in your relationships. It's about 60 to 70% of you, yeah. And I want to explain a little more fully, you can open your eyes now, what I mean when I say power plays around sex. Power plays is that idea that I'll have sex when this happens. I'll have sex when I feel really happy. I'll have sex when he touches me in the right way. I'll have sex when he fixes the things around the house that need to be fixed. I'll have sex when he spends some more time with the children. I'll have sex when I feel good. Now, all of those things, in essence, they sound like it's conditional upon the other person's behavior, which is true. But there's another condition present there, and that is that we're making our own self-expression conditional. So not only are we making our expression of love and sex to the other person conditional, but we're making it conditional to ourselves. And so those power plays are incredibly destructive. Power plays get in the way of experiencing who we are as women. Power plays cause deep, deep ruts in relationship that are difficult to overcome. One of the things that Rod and I have in our relationship is this idea that sex is not conditional. So for me, if I feel like I'm sad, it's still a possibility to have sex. If I feel angry, it's a possibility to have sex. If I'm nervous, it's a possibility to have sex. Turns out it's not for Rod. Tried all day today. No luck.
I was too nervous.
But not making sex conditional actually creates freedom in a relationship. And freedom is something that is very important and highly valued for men. When men feel conditions, they close down. They start to feel less than. They feel emasculated. They feel less powerful. And I know from times when I've been that woman holding conditions like, I'll be open when, I'll be open when, I'll have sex when. There's a part that feels powerful, but in actual fact, it's simply power over. And power over, that sense of control, is never true power. True power comes from the place of vulnerability. True power comes from the place of being able to say to somebody, I feel like a mess, I feel like shit, I'm kind of pissed with you, I'm pissed with what's going on in the world, and I'm here. Ravish me, love me, because I want to move through this. How does that sound for people? Do you want that experience of being able to be ravished through the mess and the shit and the fucked upness of the world? Yeah? Awesome, awesome.
I'm feeling less nervous.
We've got people here. Although half of them have probably seen my bottom from all the microphone adjustments. So, the journey of opening sexually, to give up power plays sexually, it changes our lives. Because I know for me, being sexually open as a woman, it's about allowing who I am to move through my body. It's about allowing my feelings. It's about allowing my inspiration. It's allowing the fullness of me rather than closed off and held back and contracted. And being sexually alive in a relationship creates inspiration. It creates much more depth. Also, giving up those power plays means that the man's not walking around feeling powerless. Because I've worked with thousands of men over the last 13 years, I've had the opportunity to hear what goes on for men. And so many men have said to me, I feel powerless around sex. I feel powerless in my relationship. I get to hear things that other women often don't hear. And so this experience of men feeling powerless around sex, I started to wonder, why does that happen? What goes on for men? And it's this curiosity about men and what goes on for them that brought me to understand that a man can have sexual pleasure on his own, of course, and he can enjoy that. But there's a quality of sex, there's a quality of connection that only happens inside of intercourse. And so when a woman is playing power games and making sex conditional, a man, he just is left in that place of, oh, I'm powerless now. There's nothing I can do. There's nowhere to go. There's nowhere to turn. How many of the men in the audience have had that experience of feeling powerless?
It's more like boredom.
Boredom?
Yeah,
Yeah, bored. Okay.
bored.
Yeah.
It knocks out the physicality.
Yeah. If there's no physicality, you're bored. Yeah. Beautiful. Totally understand that. And of course, everybody has a range of different experiences. For some people, it's bored. For some, it's powerlessness. What I've seen in the powerlessness is that it often leads to frustration, and that frustration becomes like a ball in the belly, this sense that a man doesn't know what to do with himself. He doesn't know how to move in life with that feeling of frustration and not being able to express himself. And what we have a look at through Tantra is the experience of polarity. So in polarity, there's this recognition of man and woman as energetic poles. So for a woman, my vagina is the negative polarity. That's where women receive energy in. The heart and the breasts are our positive polarity. That's where we direct energy outwards. For a man's heart is his negative polarity. That's where he receives energy. And his penis is his positive polarity. So he's directing energy out through the penis. So just imagine a situation where somebody said to you, I'm speaking to the women first of all, if somebody said to you, you cannot express your love is offensive to other people. How does that feel? Yeah, the room just went really flat and dull. So it feels terrible. And as women, we have that longing and desire inside to express ourselves through love, to express through our heart and our breasts. Sometimes that gets a little bit distorted as well, but I'll come back to that a little later on. When we are open through our heart and our breasts, it's more natural that the energy flows through our vagina and through our body. So men, as you heard from Rod, they often walk around going, I shouldn't have a penis. Let's just pretend that I don't have it. I'll leave it outside so it doesn't bother anybody. But in that experience, the man's positive polarity is cut off. And men are so often judged for being sexual. They're told not to be so sexual, not to feel desire, not to feel horny, not to want too much sex, not to want this, not to want that. But when men are on the receiving end of all those judgments, it's like they're being told that it's not okay to be who they are. It's not okay to have sexual feelings. And yet that's part of a man's dynamic, powerful expression into the world. One phrase that's quite common, I remember a lot from when I was growing up, is that idea that men just think with their dicks. And that phrase, men think with their dicks, there's actually a truth in it. However, the insult in it is what we want to take away. The insult in it is the part that is destructive. It's the part that actually makes men feel less than. The truth in it is that men have this powerful energy that comes from their penis, and it is part of their way of how they navigate through the world. And so men are driven in some ways by sex, but part of the journey that we take men on at Tantric Blossoming is helping men to be able to connect with their sexual energy, to own it, to claim it, and to move it through their body in healthy ways so that they can make more sustainable connections and relationships from that place rather than being sex-driven in an unhealthy way. Equally, women, we become love-driven. Just as men might become addicted to porn and variety of sexual experiences, women become addicted to that, I want to love someone, I want to be close to someone, I better read another romance novel, watch another romance movie, because there's that longing to express through our hearts. And when we understand this, we can come into a place where we understand that there's no judgments or blame. It's not about saying women are better, men are better. It's simply that we don't have an understanding of the polarity differences. I remember speaking a number of years ago at a breast cancer conference where one of the speakers was speaking about sexuality, and she was a nurse, and I was quite interested to hear what she would say to women who'd had their breasts removed and women who were recovering and how they could regain their sexual feelings again. And this nurse actually spent roughly 60% of her 30-minute talk making jokes about men's sexual desires, making men wrong for having sexual desires. And I remember sitting there feeling my own body in pain, looking around, seeing men in the room who were also laughing, and recognizing that the men were laughing because they've been conditioned to accept that. What I want to create is a world where it's no longer okay. It's no longer okay to make jokes about men's desire for sex. I want to create a world where men and women support the expression of each other's healthy sexuality. I want to be part of creating a world where we can stand in the fullness of our sexual expression and simply love and embrace that in healthy, supportive, life-giving ways. Who else would love to be part of that movement? Yeah. And it really is, it's time to make a difference. Because in today's world where people spend a lot of their time looking at computers, looking at screens, kind of mentally fixated, our bodies are being neglected. And when our bodies are neglected, our sex gets neglected, which means that then there's a lot of people walking around like this, oh, something's missing. I better have a look online and find the answers. Something's missing. I better look online and distract myself. Something's missing. I better look it up. But what's actually missing, firstly, is our connection to our bodies, then our connection to sex, and then our connection to healthy expression of sexuality and intimacy with another. Some of the things that I feel support the healing of sexual shame is to find safe places, whether that's in a therapeutic setting, whether it's in a Tantra workshop, whether it's in a bodywork session, whether it's in your relationship, but to find therapeutic settings where you can share your sexual story, where you can talk about the layers of shame and actually free yourself from the shame. In the context of a loving relationship, the blog that I wrote, Why I Cup His Penis Almost Every Day, for me, and that could be cupping his penis, it could be when we're lying on the couch watching a movie. It could be when we go to bed at night. It could be because we have a spare 5 minutes that we're standing in the kitchen and I'll just go while we're talking. For me, cupping his penis is a way of saying to him, without words, it's a way of saying to him, I love you, I accept you, and I want all of you. And for me, I know that Rod, like a lot of other men, has had times of walking around trying to pretend that he doesn't have that penis. But by me touching, holding, cupping his penis regularly, he starts to feel safe. He starts to feel like it's okay for him to have a penis. It's okay for him to have desires. It's okay for him to feel the power that ignites in his body. Rod made a comment earlier about how being connected to his penis makes him more trustable. And I'll share with you how I discovered that to be true in my life. How many of you have had men friends or men in your life where they're like super, 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 super safe men and they're kind of like everyone's best friend? Everyone knows someone like that? Yeah. What I discovered was that often the men who are super, super safe and want to be everybody's best friend, they're repressing so much of who they are. They're repressing their feelings, they're repressing their rage, they're repressing their desire, they're repressing their passion, they're repressing their sex, and they're trying to pretend they don't have a penis, all so that they can be close to a particular person. But what happens when you suppress huge parts of your personality in order to be close to somebody? Because as soon as we get close, things get triggered, buttons get pushed, things get activated. And when those buttons get pushed, then leaky rage, leaky desire, a hand that stays too long on the back, a hand that like grazes the butt when there was no invitation for that. The man who makes himself a safe man, the man who suppresses and hides his desires, his feelings, his sex, is actually not trustable. I had a few of those situations backfire on me. Situations where I thought somebody was being friendly, and then later on discovered that that friendliness had conditions, it had hopes sitting underneath it. Whereas a man who is forward, and when I say forward, I don't mean projecting his desire, I don't mean a man who throws his desire onto a woman, but a man who holds it in his body. So let's say if we spoke about a first date kind of situation, a man who wanted to be safe would be like this in his body. A man who was projecting his sexual energy would be like throwing his energy onto the woman and lusting, between every bite of his dinner. Whereas a man who is confident and comfortable in his sexual energy, he finds a nice place in the middle where he can feel that pulse moving through his body. And he'll look at a woman in such a way that, she feels a little bit unnerved. She feels the tingle and the electricity in her body. And she can open. It's safe for her to open. Because as women, we need something to respond to. So if a man shows up with no penis, then there's nothing to respond to. We'll make him our best friend, we'll take him out shopping with us, and we'll, share all our horror stories about our mother. There's nothing to respond to when the man shows up without his penis. If he shows up in a way that his penis is like, here I am, baby, I'm going to take you tonight, and I can't wait to rip your clothes off, then there's no space for a woman to open, because feminine energy longs to open. There does need to be a certain amount of feeling held in order for us to open. So the lusty, projecting, throwing his energy around kind of man, that's also unsafe. But the man who's like, just relaxed and confident and feeling that pulse through his body, then a woman can go, oh, this feels a little bit exciting. Oh, I can feel the response in my body. I can feel that my body wants to go somewhere with this experience with a man. So when we talk about healing sexual shame, it's healing sexual shame so that people can be alive to feel that shame moving through our bodies. Women too have also been on the receiving end of things like slut shaming and being made wrong for having sexual feelings. And so it's important for a woman to understand as well that when our sex is shut down, when our sex is conditional, we're not fully alive. We're not fully living. It's not about using sex for validation, as I shared earlier, that whole journey of trading sex for love. It's not about going there. It's also not about walking around as a nun all cloaked and hidden, but actually a woman who can hold herself and feel her sexual energy move through her body in such a way that she feels really good and alive and vibrant about who she is. Does that feel like what you would like for your life, to be walking around feeling good and alive about who you are? Yeah? Awesome. So I'm going to pass over to Rod to share a little bit around his journey. And yeah, over to Rod.
Yeah, so for me, like having experienced this in this relationship, it's had a healing effect on me. as a man. Like, I can't describe, like at times I've wanted to just cry. I've been overwhelmed with emotion just at being held, the whole cupping the penis thing. It was just almost too much to have all of me loved for who I am. It was so emotional for me to experience that I was being loved and held and all of me was welcome. Like, one of the feelings that was in the past, which I don't know if I touched on before, but, you know, being a man and having a penis, there's this sense of that I've got to prove that I'm not a perpetrator and that I'm not a rapist and that I'm not dangerous. I've got to prove that first, and then we can have some kind of talk or interaction. It feels like starting back behind, as if, you know, I'm condemned first, and then if I can prove it, if I try hard enough, long enough, that somehow, you know, I'm not a threat or a rapist or one of those other things. And so having that met in a relationship, that all of me is okay to be there, there's this amazing healing and transformation. And it was the most liberating feeling of love that I've ever experienced. And the freedom that I felt in that moment as a man was just beautiful. I don't know if you know this, but like for masculine people or men in particular, that how emotionally involved they get in sports. I'm just going to sidetrack for a sec. One of the reasons that men get so emotionally involved and it evokes so much emotion in sport is freedom. It's the liberation from constraint. You've got two football teams. Like, if we just had like one team and they could just kick as many goals as they wanted, just raise your hand, men, if you'd watch that. Okay, one. It gets really boring. What we need is another team to limit that somehow freedom's a threat. It's going to disappear. And in that moment, when someone kicks a goal and the man will just lose his mind, it's like, yes! In that moment, that emotion that's flowing through his body is freedom. He's experiencing love. So when a man can experience love in a relationship with a woman as freedom, when he can feel freer in his relationship with his partner, there is nowhere else that man is going to want to be. He doesn't need a man cave. He doesn't need the backup with the boys down the pub or the mates to ring. He doesn't need to have freedom out here where he wants to check out of his relationship. He has freedom in his relationship with his chosen partner. Where else is that man going to want to be? Because I know where I want to be. It's there. And that's part of the healing. That's part of the masculine experience of love, is through freedom. And having all of me loved, all of me being welcome in my relationship feels like freedom. And it's the most beautiful gift I've ever received. Thank you.